When people think of World War II, images of tanks, planes, and epic battles often come to mind. But you know what's often forgotten is that for the men fighting on the front lines, daily survival didn't always come down to weapons or strategies. Sometimes it depended on simple tricks, improvised, shocking and often desperate methods that meant the difference between life and death. Among German soldiers, one particular survival trick stands out. It wasn't about better rifles, smarter tactics, or even supplies from home. It was about using what was around them in the harshest environments, creating makeshift solutions to withstand hunger, cold, and exhaustion. These weren't strategies taught in training manuals. They were battlefield secrets, passed quietly between men who knew that without them they might not live to see the next dawn. To understand why German soldiers turned to desperate measures, you first need to picture the Eastern Front. From 1941 onward, when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union, soldiers found themselves fighting not just against a determined enemy, but also against the brutal Russian winter. Temperatures plunged to -30°C. Fuel froze in tanks, machine guns jammed from the cold. But the real danger was not always enemy fire. It was exposure, hunger, and the slow grinding down of the human body in conditions where survival itself became a battle. For many German soldiers, supply lines stretched thin across thousands of miles, and rations were often delayed or completely cut off. Proper winter clothing was scarce, and what had been planned as a quick campaign turned into a drawn-out war of attrition. Soldiers had to improvise, finding ways to protect themselves against frostbite, starvation and exhaustion. It was here, in the frozen fields and ruined villages of Russia, that some of the most shocking survival tricks were born. Among the survival methods whispered about by veterans was the use of animal remains, particularly horse carcasses, as improvised shelters and food sources. Horses were critical to the German war effort, with over 2 million used for transport on the Eastern Front. But when they died, whether from enemy fire, exhaustion or starvation, soldiers sometimes used them in ways that shocked outsiders. In the dead of winter, a frozen horse could mean warmth. Soldiers cut open the carcass and crawled inside, using its body heat and insulating flesh to shield themselves from freezing winds. Others stripped fat and boiled bones to create crude broths, extracting every last calorie of sustenance in environments where supplies were non-existent. This gruesome tactic wasn't taught by commanders, it wasn't written down in manuals. It was a whispered last resort trick, born out of necessity when frostbite and starvation loomed larger than Soviet bullets. To many, it was shocking, but to the soldier who did it, it was life. Another survival method German soldiers employed involved creating hidden fires that produced little to no smoke. In open, snow-covered fields, a plume of smoke could give away a position instantly, inviting artillery or sniper fire. Soldiers learned to dig shallow pits in the frozen ground and burn dried dung, peat or smouldering embers instead of open wood fires. Covered with a layer of snow or soil, the heat could warm hands or thaw frozen food without revealing their location. This small trick kept countless men alive during long nights in the freezing steppe. It was shocking in its simplicity, burning dung or frozen peat instead of wood, but it worked, and survival in war was never about comfort, only about enduring. The German army had underestimated the Russian winter. Many soldiers entered the campaign still wearing summer uniforms, relying on thin coats against Siberian-level cold, and with supply shortages they turned to local improvisation. Soldiers stuffed newspapers, straw, or even grass between layers of clothing to add insulation. Some tore curtains or bed sheets from abandoned villages, wrapping them around their legs or boots to prevent frostbite. Others wore women's scarves or coats taken from civilians, anything that added another layer against the wind. It may sound desperate, and honestly it was, but these makeshift garments often meant the difference between losing toes, fingers, or entire limbs to frostbite and being able to fight another day. One of the most effective yet surprising tricks German soldiers borrowed was a technique often associated with Arctic explorers, the snow cave. By digging into a snowbank and hollowing out a small chamber, soldiers created insulated shelters that trapped body heat and provided protection from the wind. It may sound counterintuitive, but snow, when packed, can act as an insulator. Inside, the temperature could rise above freezing, even when it was -30 outside. For soldiers who had marched all day through waist-deep snow, this shocking realization that snow could actually save their lives rather than kill them was a survival secret passed among those who endured the harshest fronts of the war. When rations ran out, German soldiers often turned to what little the land offered. In winter, this could mean boiling pine needles for a vitamin-rich tea to ward off scurvy, or eating bark and moss. Some units, particularly in besieged areas like Stalingrad, survived by scraping frozen potatoes from abandoned fields or scavenging half-rotten grain stores. In some cases, soldiers resorted to eating leather, boiling belts, boots or horse harnesses to soften them enough to chew. To modern readers, these tactics are shocking, even grotesque, but they highlight the brutal reality. A soldier cut off from supply lines had to turn anything, no matter how unappetizing, into a source of energy. Finding water in sub-zero temperatures presented its own challenge. Snow could be melted, but doing so over open fires risked detection. Some soldiers learned to keep small amounts of snow in their mouths, letting it melt slowly rather than swallowing it in large chunks, which could lower body temperature dangerously. Others placed snow in metal canteens and kept them inside their coats, letting body heat do the work. This simple survival trick conserved fuel and kept men alive without drawing enemy attention. Not all survival tricks were physical. For German soldiers enduring endless days of cold and hunger, mental resilience became just as critical. Soldiers learned to rotate watches in smaller shifts, keeping morale higher by avoiding long, spirit-breaking stretches of isolation. They developed routines, cleaning weapons, singing songs or writing letters, not just as tasks, but as lifelines. In conditions where despair could kill as surely as a bullet, maintaining a sense of order and discipline was itself a survival strategy. Looking back, it's easy to be shocked by the lengths soldiers went to in order to survive. Crawling into horse carcasses, boiling belts, burning dung for heat, these aren't the stories often told in textbooks or military histories, yet they are the raw, unfiltered reality of war. They remind us that survival doesn't always depend on strategy or weaponry, but on human ingenuity, desperation, and the refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds. The shocking survival tricks of German soldiers in World War II reveal the brutal truth of combat at its rawest level. Behind the battles and campaigns were men trying to endure, using anything and everything to stay alive another day. It is in these stories of desperate improvisation that we see war not as a clash of nations, but as a daily fight for human survival in the harshest of conditions. If you found this exploration of the hidden survival tactics of World War II soldiers valuable, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this video with others who want to understand the human side of history. The past is full of lessons, and together we can continue uncovering the stories that textbooks leave out.